So here today we have Larry Diamond, professor at the Stanford University, and he is attending Freedom Online Coalition that's being hosted in Mongolia. And in the afternoon, I heard you will be giving a lecture for the National University students. So more on your objectives coming here this time into Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar.
Well, first of all, I wanted to participate in this very important meeting. The Freedom Online Coalition is, I think, a very innovative and important international forum and coalition of governments, civil society actors, businesses and business leaders who share the common goal of trying to defend freedom and an open, integrated internet online.
So in that regard, as you are studying the democracy issues in the globally in the world, and you have also written the book Global Democracy Recession, right? So how do you see doing studies about democracy, but then going online and being restricted online?
Well, you have raised a very important and timely question. If people don't have freedom online in the world we live in today, the contemporary era where the internet and online activity is so important, such an important dimension of rights and collective action, if they don't have freedom online, then they don't have freedom, right?
Yes.
And so the notion that there are separate worlds, online and offline, and that there can be rights, security, and freedom offline, and that those can be compromised online, but that's a very limited problem. I think that notion is increasingly discredited. First of all, what happens online has very concrete implications for people's lives offline, for their safety, their security, the privacy of their personal information, their ability to affect their government or exercise their citizens' rights or just be safe in their person from abuse or detention. So these two worlds are integrated. We can't separate them any longer. And one reason why there is a democratic recession in the world is because more and more states, particularly authoritarian states like Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, are working more aggressively to constrain freedom and monitor citizens' activities online. But in addition, even many democracies are engaging in surveillance of their citizens and constraint of activity that isn't fully consistent with democratic principles.
Yes, and we do have, even in Mongolia, some instances that the freedom online was restricted by the government by shutting down those pornographic sites in Mongolia, while that has led to many discussions throughout the social media as well. So as a young democratic country, how do you see that for Mongolia?
Well,
so I just took an example with the pornographic sites, but there are many other instances as well.
The problem is, I generally tend to be a strong libertarian, so I think everything should be allowed as long as it doesn't advocate violence or harm against specific individuals. Every society has to grapple with where to draw the line. I think the notion of removing web pages that celebrate and encourage terrorist violence or human slavery or human trafficking or degradation of women or child trafficking or child pornography. I think people could generally agree that if you draw these ground rules strictly, states, can be very democratic and still remove that kind of content. block it. It starts becoming a slippery slope when the state tries to become a general moral censor and say to adult citizens, you can't look at pornography in the privacy of your own home. Personally, I would favor allowing that and have a fairly liberal attitude to what citizens can do. I think the rules for removing content should be very narrow, very specific. Otherwise, you walk down a slippery slope toward the decline of freedom. But every society needs to find the right moral balance for itself. I would only say it should be a democratic process, and it should be transparent. The rules should be transparent, and the bias, the presumption, should be in favor of internet freedom.
So with that angle, how about the identity online? Because I would be personally very concerned about my identity or being even stolen. So in that regard, how much legislation do we have in Mongolia here to really protect or to have really good transparency?
Well, I can't answer what your laws are with respect to that issue. I will say that everyone should be concerned about the theft of their online identity. And not only the political and social implications of that, but the financial implications. Increasingly, there are stories in the West of people being financially ruined by having their sensitive banking information stolen through hacking. So people need to be vigilant, they need to be careful, they need to be educated, to have very strong passwords, and to be very, very mindful of their own personal internet security. And then, you know, each country needs to have very robust laws to try and combat this.
So in that regard, as you will also give the speech at the National University this afternoon, so what will be the scope of this lecture?
I'm going to talk about the global recession of democracy, the fact that the growth of democracy in the world has halted for now 9 years, and there's been some slippage in democracy and freedom, and there seems to be a resurgence of authoritarianism, and try and understand why this is happening.
Even in the Western side of the world?
Well, it's a different phenomenon on the Western side. I think generally in the world, a lot of democracies are slipping back because of bad governance, because of corruption and abuse of power. So it's very important to design institutions in a way that work in a serious, professional, neutral, fair, and a transparent way to control corruption and abuse of power without themselves becoming abusers of power. I will say that I think there's growing concern in Mongolia that your Independent Commission Against Corruption has become a law unto itself and has become perhaps so all-powerful and so zealous in trying to control corruption that it maybe is even corrupt itself. But so each society needs to explore this and investigate this and find the right balance. On the other hand, societies need to be serious about it, because if there's widespread corruption, if public resources are not being used to serve the public good, but rather are serving the private interests of powerful individuals, if public wealth, mineral wealth or other wealth, is being unfairly given away to powerful actors or interests inside the country or outside the country, without a transparent process, without really neutral, fair, and competitive bidding, then the national interest suffers. And when people find out about these things, they lose faith in the system of government, and democracy suffers, and that opens the way for an autocrat, a populist zealot, or some other strong man, or even the military to come in and seize power and sideline democracy. And this is what happened in Russia under Putin. You know, there was widespread corruption in Russia. People were very upset about it. They could see that there were powerful oligarchs emerging that were becoming rich, but ordinary people were not getting better in their own lives. And this created, of course, Putin has made it far worse. He's probably one of the wealthiest men in the world now. But the point is that it created an opportunity for a strong man to come in and say, I will fix this problem.
So as one of the biggest representatives from the academia world taking part in this conference, how do you see, do we have in Mongolia competent human resources to do the studies, academic studies, in order to improve all of these situations that you have just mentioned, in order to come up with the proper laws, proper regulations that will really perhaps, let's say, protect the freedom, the democracy, and all those visions that the leaders that we have now have been envisioning 20 years ago?
I think that you got a lot of talent in this country. You don't have to be an academic to figure this out. I mean, I think that academics from political science, law, and other fields can make a contribution. But I think there's a lot of knowledge, wisdom, and democratic commitment in civil society and in politics, including members of parliament. I've talked to several parliamentary leaders while I've been here, and I've been very impressed with their seriousness of purpose, their commitment to democratic reform, to trying to correct the ways this system has, you know, disappointed. And I think that you definitely have the talent in Mongolia to fix these problems.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay.
And I think you rush for the next session as well.
Okay.
Thank you.